said before in these evenings that when people ask me what I like so much about reading poetry, and it sounds like a facetious answer, but it's not. I like the white space around the edge, because isn't that the place where poetry happens? Because prose always goes to the end of the line and often doesn't give you a chance to breathe, but poetry is full of this white space that gives you a chance to think. And Arundhathi Subramaniam's poems are full of this wonderful white space, and she thinks so hard in this book about the line, about what the line is. One of her poems in a sequence called Quick Fix Memos for Difficult Days, she says, "Stretch until you reach the edge, then consider a pause, it's usually worth it." And that is in a lot of different short lines. You think, gosh, she thought so hard about the line, how that helps the poem become a poem. Sometimes single words on a line, deeper into the darkening, widening meritocracy of the heart. And that becomes the line. I was thinking really hard about how she makes the line out of small things. Then, because when I read a book, I always like to read it with a capital R and really take it to bits. A line appeared, you probably can't see it, a bit of cotton came out of the book. And I thought, gosh, the book itself is actually agreeing with me and it's becoming a line on its own. So I thought, yes, the book itself is made in a very physical way from lines. These poems are full of love, of place, and our language mediates experience, and they are full of lines. And there's a great line in here that says, poems matter because they have holes. And that's right, isn't it? Poems matter because they got holes. Prose is just a big slab, but poems matter because they got holes. Arundhathi Subramaniam.
I'd like to start with a poem dedicated to my friends. It's intended to be a tribute to my friends, though it may not sound like one. And I'm fully aware that I'm a difficult friend to have, so I'm quite prepared to have my friends write similar poems for me. My friends, they're sodden, the lot of them, leafy, with more than a whiff of damage, mottled with history, dark with grime. God knows I've wanted them different. Less preoccupied, more jaunty, less handled with care, more airbrushed, less prone to impossible dreams, less perishable, a little more willing to soak in the sun. They don't measure up. They're unpunctual. They turn suddenly tuberous. But they matter for their crooked smiles, their endless distractions, their sudden pauses. Signs that they know how green stems twist and thicken as they vanish into the dark, making their way through their own sticky, vernacular tissues of mud, improvising, blundering, improvising. Some years ago, I was trying to explain to an Italian friend of mine the notion of the Ishtadevta, or the personal god, which to my mind is one of the great gifts of Indian culture. The fact that you're actually offered a kind of spiritual à la carte, where you can pick the god or goddess of your choice, the one most suited to your taste and temperament. And the fact that this tradition is absolutely harmoniously, at the best of times, compatible with a highly sophisticated philosophical tradition of non-dualism. The fact that both these strands can exist side by side without any seeming contradiction is something that fascinates me. And I was trying to explain this to him, and when I couldn't get through, I just ended up writing a poem. how some Hindus find their personal gods. For A.S. who wonders about Ishtadevtas. It's about learning to trust the tug that draws you to some shadowed alcove, undisturbed by footfall and butter lamps. A blue, dark coolness where you find him waiting patiently. That perfect minor deity, shy, crumbly, oven fresh, just a little wry, content to play a cameo in everyone's life but your own. A God who looks like he could understand errors in translation, blizzards on the screen, gaps in memory, lapses in attention, who looks like he could learn by rote the fury, the wheeze, the pali, the pigeon, the gnashing mixer grinder, the awkward Remington stutter of your heart, who could make them his own. After that, you can settle for none other. I've always had mixed feelings about the city of Bombay, very ambivalent feelings, but its trains have often offered me fodder for poems. And this particular poem would not have happened without a peak hour Bombay local, so I'm grateful to that one. Or take Mrs. Salim Sheikh, who ripples hospitably out of her halwa pink blouse and sari. Synthetics are so practical to wear on trains, na? Who invokes the protocol of Indian Railways to ask for your telephone number even before the journey has begun. Who unwinds her life story, well-oiled, without a single split end. She's Hindu, a doctor like her husband. The matron warned her about interfaith unions, but she had no doubts, not even in '93, when others did. Her ancestors supplied butter to Queen Victoria. His grandfather, better still, was Court Diwan of Kolhapur. I've been lucky, she says. The gods have been good. I eat and cook non-veg. Many of my friends are pure Brahmin. My sons are circumcised. My heart is pure. I practice no religion, only homeopathy. Over lunch, she remembers the day her mother-in-law died in her arms. I bathed her, and when her body was taken away, I told my husband, I want to be buried in the Kabristan. It's closer to our house than the crematorium. Take Mrs. Salim Sheikh. And I'd like to conclude with the title poem, which is a poem based on an old story from Indian mythology, old like all Indian myths are. The great god Shiva held out the fruit of knowledge to his two sons, Kartikeya and Ganesha, and he said, the one who travels the entire world and returns first will get the fruit of knowledge. Kartikeya jumps onto his peacock and takes off for this expedition around the world. Ganesha, wiser, simply circles his parents. He recognizes them for who they are. He says, you are the progenitors of the universe. What more could I ask for? And so Shiva hands him the fruit. And many years later, Kartikeya returns and flies into a rage. And he says, this is not fair. These were not the rules. The fruit ought to have been mine. And Shiva draws him close and says, but you are the fruit, don't you see? And I wondered whether Kartikeya would have been able to hear that piece of wisdom before he left on his journey. I suspect he wouldn't. And so this is a story, like so many others in world mythology and literature, that replays the whole story, the journey from innocence to experience in its own way. When God is a traveler, wondering about Kartikeya, Muruga, Subramania, my namesake. Trust the God back from his travels, his voice whole grain and chamomile, his wisdom neem, his peacock sweaty plumed, drowsing in the shadows. Trust him who sits wordless on park benches, listening to the cries of children fading into the dusk, his gaze emptied of vagrancy, his heart of ownership. Trust him who has seen enough, revolutions, promises, the desperate light of shopping malls, hospital rooms, manifestos, theologies, the iron taste of blood, the great craters in the middle of love. Trust him who no longer begrudges his brother his prize, his parents their partisanship. Trust him whose race is run, whose journey remains, who stands fluid-stemmed, knowing he is the tree that bears fruit, festive, with sun. Trust him who recognizes you, abundant, auspicious, battle-scarred, alive, and knows from where you come. Trust the God, ready to circle the world all over again, this time for no reason at all other than to see it through your eyes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arundhati. She got our first whoop of the night, which is good. A bit late for the first whoop, but that's good. We like whoop in here at the T.S. Eliot's.